Welcome to Outback Outdoors. Make sure you like, subscribe, and click the alert to stay up to date on all our new videos.
So right now, earlier we just mounted the rest. We got everything leveled. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm just kind of using my calibrated eyeball. And I am going to just basically look down the center of the limb pocket, okay, and line this arrow up right down the center of the top limb pocket.
Gotcha.
What I'm looking to do is put that arrow down the middle of the riser, and by looking down the center of the limb pocket and kind of starting it off here, I am going to kind of compare that with what I see down here in the center and on the bottom of the riser here, okay? Ideally, if I line these up, middle of the limb pocket with the arrow should run right down the middle of the bottom limb pocket, and I know the arrow should be very close to running perfectly true down the center. And that's just a starting position. There may be a slight adjustment left and right when we go to shoot through paper. I tried to touch the rest as little as possible. Cool thing with Hoyt is they've got this nice little spacer kit that comes on, or your dealer should have to use on. Yep, there it is. Sure enough,
HBX tuning spacer kit, and what you're going to do is that's going to move your cam over and make the adjustment rather than you just sitting there tweaking on your rest.
Exactly. I mean, obviously your rest only has so much adjustment. Cool. So rest should be, in a perfect world, exactly where we want it. I'm going to do a quick check of your axes on this sight. I know this sight's been on a previous bow, correct? So right now, all I'm doing is trying to level the first axis. Now, a lot of other sight manufacturers, I'd tell you to level the riser and then adjust first axis to the riser. This particular sight doesn't have a first axis adjustment. So if we use the driver, okay, to set all my levels off of and know that that is perfectly plumb, we're not going to have any problems.
Now, will you then take that other level and come on here and you want this riser to match your string? No.
No.
Okay.
And the reason why I personally don't do that is, again, we talked cam lean earlier, okay? If, say, this cam leans away from the riser, this cam leans to the, to, okay, or vice versa, we may have a angled string,
you would be giving yourself a false level.
Exactly.
I got you.
Exactly. I want to know that the driver of that sight is perfectly true. That way, when I set the second axis and you draw that bow back, you know that that driver is perfectly plumb. I match the third axis to that driver as well, knowing that that driver is plumb. And again, the reason why I do that is if any of those are off, okay, and you cant the bow to square it up, if that driver's no longer perfectly vertical and you went to dial your sight out, you're physically moving your sight housing left and right.
Right. So third axis. First axis is simple.
First axis is really simple. Basically, on this particular bow, on that driver, straight up and down.
Second axis is simple. It's basically,
Yeah, it's second axis is on the horizontal plane.
Horizontal, yeah.
Okay, so just like anything, you're mounting a new TV on the wall. You want to make sure the brackets are set up so your TV is level, right? We don't want to be watching our TV canted off.
Third axis is where people get confused.
Yep.
So imagine if this was my sight pin. This is my third axis. Where that's important isn't on flat ground. It's at a 45-degree angle. Imagine if my third axis was in. As I come down and I come to 45 degrees and then I match my bubble up, I have now
your bow.
I've now counted my bow and I'm left to right.
Yep.
So that's where matching first, second, then getting your third axis at full draw.
Correct.
Because the torque of your riser, people don't understand that even though it's a carbon or even though it's aluminum, it's going to have torque in the riser. We have to have that matched at full draw. So
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
But it is important, especially when you're mountain hunting.
Oh, yes.
I don't see it as much in a tree stand at 25, 30-yard shots, but when you're shooting 60 yards on a bighorn sheep or a mountain goat, and now all of a sudden you're 5 inches to the right and your bubble was leveled, there's an issue you got there. And it's not because you were off, it's because your system was set up incorrectly.
That's correct.
So For those of you who are flatland shooters, not knocking you, whatever, but
Yeah.
if you're coming to attack, you want this setup right.
100%. If you have the option and you're in the market for a new sight, I would highly suggest pick something up with third axis, have it set up correctly, because as bow hunters, we don't want to leave any accuracy on the table. And the cool thing is there sights out there that have first, second, third axis adjustment. They're not ridiculously expensive. No, there's some out there that are crazy high, but there's some sites out there that are going to give you that technology that are reasonably priced. Now, this is essentially like third axis. We really want to do this at full draw. I'm just using it to take a quick peek to see how close.
And what are you looking at? You're looking at this versus this?
Correct.
Okay.
So we like to use a door jamb. You can use like a plumb bob. Plumb bobs are great. You know, if you can hang, a fairly heavy rope. I like to use a fairly heavy rope. That way I can see it, right? I don't want to be using fishing line.
Right.
But you'll hang a fairly heavy, with a heavy rope, heavy weight at the bottom of it, so you know that sucker is running perfectly true, and you're essentially taking this bar, okay, and you're gonna match it
with that line
on that rope. Yep.
At that angle of 45 degrees.
Exactly. That way, as we aim down, we line that up on that rope. We know that we are holding the bow perfectly true. Okay. Now we're gonna compare our bubble level. This is perfectly true. What's our bubble level and our housing say? I don't care what the bubble in this says.
No.
Okay, because if the bow twists, again, this axis would be off at that point. But that vertical bar there we know would stay true. Okay. I'm going to compare that with my housing. Is my housing off? Yes, no. Make the adjustment as needed to get that perfectly square.
Probably the most simple adjustment.
It really is.
Because your adjustment is 2 screws here. Tight, loosen one, tighten the other, and that takes this in, and it's going to adjust that. And then once that's done, that's the third axis should be your last adjustment.
Yep. And you can, for guys that that are messing with your third axis, you're setting stuff up, you can technically shoot your third axis in. Okay, and the reason why I say that is if you go out to the range and you have a little bit of uphills and downhills, if you're seeing a left and right variance, that right there is going to tell you that more than likely your third axis is off.
That doesn't apply to me at all because I miss on flat ground. So yeah,
But what you can do is if you're starting to get those lefts and rights on an uphill or downhill shot, you can make those micro adjustments. Okay, and the way I like to try to remember it is if you hit to the right, okay, chances are you're canting your bow to the right, okay? So you'd want to swing your housing away,
out.
Okay? Out, in your instance,
right.
Okay? Because you're lefty. Right-handed person may be opposite of this, but depending upon the direction that you're hitting, you want to swing your housing away from that, essentially, okay? And that may start cleaning it up. Small adjustments, really, really tiny. We're not, you're not watching your housing make these big sweeps, okay? Just a real small adjustment. So I'm taking a peek at this right here. Again, this bow is not at full draw. I just want to see how close we are. And believe it or not, the driver's perfectly square. The bubble level it's honestly, it's between the lines in your housing. So it should be close, but we're going to check this at full draw here in a moment. I'd say, let's go ahead and take a shot through the paper. Okay. We'll see how close this is tune-wise.
Which we want, what do we want?
Whatever your preference is.
I want to do both.
Because we'll get that. Once we know that that's all set up, we'll go ahead and we'll drop the peep in, finalize this with that third axis adjustment, and then I'll let you get this thing sighted in. Hoyt could have used this as their flagship cam on their RX-7. I don't think anybody would have complained.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
That's my personal opinion on it. Look at that fancy little stand.
That is nice.
Isn't it? So this is obviously just the initial setup. Hopefully everything is perfect, but every bow's different. Some bows are, a little bit finickier than others. So we'll see what we get out of that. Ooh, not too bad. So started off right now, that particular tear is perfectly level. There's no knock height issues to that at all, which is what I've been experiencing out of the HBX cam. This particular tear is a little bit of a knock right tear. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to play with those spacers on that particular bow. Hoyt's got a fancy little tool I'll show you too, in order to take this out without having to touch the rest. You want to try it with the hinge?
Let's try it with the hinge.
Let's try it with the hinge. Super dang good.
I'm just glad I hit the paper. I gotta be honest. Because I was kind of going, I think that's about good. Now watch me put it right
Through the
through
same
the
hole.
same freaking hole.
Hey, man, one hole accuracy. That's what the rifle hunters want.
That's right.
How's that draw, weight, and everything feel for you?
I think it's all right.
Cool. Dang! That's perfect. That was perfect with the hinge. So that can just be there. I mean, that can be you pulling in the back wall, slight different geometry of the bow due
Right.
to pulling harder on that.
Okay, I'm gonna have you back it off just a little bit.
Okay.
Because I just because my shoulder, I can feel it in my shoulder, and I'm gonna want to shoot this a bunch. Yeah. So I might as well. There's no reason for me to tweak myself.
No, absolutely not.
But yeah,
that's pretty good. So just take one turn out. Is that okay?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because that'll, what, 2 pounds?
About 3.
Okay.
2.5, 3.
Okay. I'm gonna try and not hit the same hole. Oh yeah. Now that was me.
Generally speaking, I would contribute the difference in tears with different releases is one, the direction that the hook swings, and facial pressure.
Ah.
Facial pressure is usually where I see the biggest change. It's pretty good. I mean, I'd be nitpicking that.
Yeah.
Quite nice. That was your first tear. It's a little bit knock right. I don't expect you to
That's
see.
with this, right?
That's with that, yep.
Yeah, so, I mean, if I was hunting,
Yeah.
I would want it set up for this.
Okay, so-
But right now, I'm okay. I can live with that little bit of tear.
Okay.
Again, the point of impact's gonna be a little bit different.
Yep.
So I'm gonna probably shoot the hinge.
The hinge? Okay.
And
well, you're
so,
getting, you're
to
getting
start.
getting a great tear
and
with
then,
the hinge.
by the time we get to that, I'm gonna end up going and saying, hey, I need to retune this bow anyway. We're gonna go to a heavier arrow. We're, so yeah.
So everything will change. Okay, so good. Peep Sight time. So
Peep Sight time. There
Yep.
should be a song. Sorry.
So Hamskea Raptor Peep.
Let's talk about training strings.
Sure. Okay.
You're gonna put this on here. I'm gonna go shoot it 3-4 times. Mm-hmm. Then, what can we really expect time width, shot width, or shot number?
Sure.
Till it seats in.
That, in my personal opinion, is going to be most affected based off of are you shooting a factory string or are you shooting a custom string?
Right.
Okay. Custom string manufacturers have the time to pre-stretch a set of strings.
That's like American Bowstring.
America's Best.
Or
Gas,
Winner's Choice used to be this way. I don't know how they are now since they got bought out, in the day. But when Mike Slinkard owned them, 10 shots and that thing was rock solid.
Yeah, I mean, they made great strings. But generally speaking, a custom string manufacturer is going to take a little less shooting time. It's just the way that it is. And that's because, again, they can pre-stretch their strings. They're serving everything under a substantial amount of tension. So there's, generally speaking, less movement. Okay. Now, for a guy putting a Peep Sight in and working with a factory set of strings, they're bow manufacturers, not string builders. Okay. Now they have a string department, right? They got to put strings on their bows, in order to launch an arrow. So I would say on a factory set of strings, get 150 shots into it.
Okay.
Okay. So generally speaking, I would, on my own personal bows, I'd get this initial setup like we did without a Peep Sight, and I would literally be blank bailing without a peep.
Okay.
And I'm just shocking that string, okay, and I'm allowing that string to settle because I know this particular peep is going to turn a little bit, and you're going to be training it. I know that that's going to happen for you, right?
So you're tying this in basically just to see where it comes back?
Yep, so I'm tying around the Peep Sight right now. I'm not tying above and below, okay? We can make micro adjustments in elevation, okay? Obviously, I'm not going to start with the Peep Sight down here and run it all the way up the length of the string,
and every
right?
time you move it, it also goes with
the twist.
The twist.
Yep, so it is going to rotate.
Right.
But the reason why I want to do this is, we get this peep tied around, we go into my little tuning tunnel over there, we take a couple, you draw the bow back a couple times, you think it's close, you know, who knows, maybe we take a shot or two, you know. In a Peep Sight, not being tied around, not fixed to the string, you're asking to have another projectile, right? You draw that bow back without the Peep Sight tied around, okay, locked into the string, and you cut that thing loose, there is a possibility it shoots directly out of the string, okay? Chances are it flies down range and everything's fine. Or worst case, it bounces off your riser and it's coming back at your face, okay? It hit you in the eye, who knows? Right. So
it's not worth it.
It's not worth it, exactly. So in order to prevent injury, we tie around it. Again, it's not fixed, it's not locked, but it can't come out, okay? So if I need to move it up or down to find your happy place, right? We can do that without an issue. Okay.
Talk about that stretching thing you just did.
Yeah, so in this particular instance here, we went ahead and dropped that peep in. The D-loop was a little bit canted off, okay? And that's just due to kind of spreading that string out. It changes some of the tension to it. Again, things are settling, things are moving. So the D-loop was kind of pushed off to the side a little bit. So what I did is I pinched the string, okay? I pinched where that serving was at so it wouldn't rotate. And I grabbed the knots of that D-loop and give it a little spin. When I do that, I always like to come back at it with the D-loop pliers if I can, just to make sure that everything is cinched up. Yep, so this is an outer limit set. We've had these forever. Gosh, they're covered in bowstring wax. But all I'm doing is I'm setting that tool up on there just to give that D-loop a pull and make sure it's seated in that position. Easton makes a pretty cool little set here as well. You'll put the string on one side, D-loop on the other, give the pliers a little squeeze and that'll spread it out, make sure everything's nice and tight. But anytime I manipulate the D-loop, I'm not necessarily trying to make the D-loop longer. I'm not really reefing on it. I don't want to really squeeze it down, because if you do go too far, you can separate the center serving and that's going to cause issues. We just want to make sure it's snug. That looks pretty good. I'm pulling on that D-loop, okay, kind of pretending to say that I hooked onto the release. I'm just watching that peep. I want to make sure that that D-loop and that peep are pretty square to each other. That way the D-loop's not causing peep rotation. Right. So we should be close. I didn't know exactly what Trevon's Peep Sight height is going to be yet, okay? But what we like to do here at our shop is I like to measure from the inside of the D-loop to what would be the center of the peep. For somebody that's working on their own bow, let's say they've got their previous bow, they just bought a brand new one. One way to know what your Peep Sight height is going to be is if you have an arrow nocked and you draw your old bow, have a buddy measure from the center of your peep to the center of that arrow, okay? On your new bow, as you're setting everything up, and we went into the tunnel earlier to paper tune, I could have measured from the center of your arrow to the string and found that same height. Okay, let's say it was 3.5 inches. Right. Okay, I could have marked 3.5 inches on your string. We could have came right into here, dropped the peep in, tied it up, and your Peep Sight would actually be at the correct height, or really dang close.
Right, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually just go and see what's natural and what feels comfortable.
Exactly,
okay.
Exactly.
Thanks for watching Outback Outdoors. We encourage you to comment below, and as always, like, subscribe, and click the alert to stay up to date on all our new videos.